we are extremely pleased to see that the Supreme Court verdict has effectively been not interfered with by the Bombay High Court. What the Bombay High Court has just pronounced is that as far as the put options that were the subject matter of this controversy are concerned, clearly there was no question of the Bombay High Court revisiting the findings of the Supreme Court of India, which is what the Income Tax Department had put into challenge once again in a fresh round of litigation, which clearly was, in our view, unwarranted. So we're extremely pleased with the verdict, and obviously we still do not have the benefit of having read the judgment, but once we see the detailed reasoning, I'm sure there will be far more to discuss.
Ma'am, if you look at the operational pronouncement from the bench, clearly the Supreme Court order, which was passed earlier, seems to have had a bearing on this particular order. Could you explain the link? Because clearly the Supreme Court has said that the question of assignment of call options does not even arise, and therefore there is no question of jurisdiction, and hence Vodafone's appeal has been allowed. If you could throw some more light on that front, on what bearing the Apex Court's conclusions as far as this call center deal is concerned have had on today's verdict, ma'am.
Well, Ashwin, as you know, there are two aspects. One was the aspect of the call center, which you just alluded to, and then there was the aspect of the options. And very clearly, what has weighed with the court, from what we have just heard, appears to be that the Supreme Court already in its 2012 January judgment did consider all of these matters, and therefore quite clearly there is no scope for that to be now rehashed in the manner in which the tax department is seeking to do. And in view of the documentation, which clearly I would expect that the Bombay High Court would have once again gleaned with a view to satisfying itself that there was absolutely no scope for the tax department to on merits have any assertion that would remotely be capable of being justifiable. I would expect that by virtue of on both counts, presumably, the Bombay High Court has returned a verdict in favour of Vodafone.
Ma'am, now, as a result of this 8,500 crore transfer pricing order, clearly what had happened was that the department had sought to add that 8,500 crore rupees to the taxable income of Vodafone's India unit. Following that, there was also a demand order that was raised of around 3,700 odd crores. What will be the status of that demand order following today's favourable verdict?
It falls away, Ashwin, as it must. And essentially that is now no longer an issue as far as Vodafone is concerned. Obviously, the next steps of the tax department is something that we will have to await.
Ma'am, one aspect that I wanted to address was that this is not the first case which has involved Vodafone. Vodafone has been involved in several other litigations with the income tax department over the years. It's won this particular round. And also the entire international investor community has been closely watching such cases because these cases have an impact on investor sentiment. What's the preliminary reaction from your end when it comes to the impact that today's verdict might have on international investor sentiment and also certainty, because that's something that MNCs always look out for?
Well, I think today's verdict is a full affirmation of the fact that we have a rule of law in India, and very clearly it reaffirms that our courts will eventually do justice irrespective of unreasonable demands that come forth sometimes from the tax department.
Ma'am, any question of law that has been answered in today's case because it dealt with assignment of call options, or will there be more clarity once the written verdict comes out?
I would expect that once we have the benefit of the verdict, we will be able to perhaps deal with that question.
And clearly the Income Tax Department has the option of challenging this order and filing an SLP at the Supreme Court if it wishes to do so.
Well, that would be a matter for them to consider. That would perhaps be an available legal right. Whether or not they eventually pursue that remedy remains to be seen. More so in view of the previous round, which you're aware of, Ashwin, where you know that the issue of share premium was something that was considered at the government level and effectively buried. I would certainly think that would be the proper course of action for this particular verdict to also take. But of course that remains within the ambit of the government. So
you are alluding to the fact that in the share premium tussle, the government decided not to go ahead and challenge the order at the Supreme Court. Ma'am, one final question. What are some of the key takeaways from this order as far as other MNCs operating in India are concerned? Is there something that can be gleaned from this order which perhaps will provide more certainty to them in terms of intergroup deals?
Well, I think firstly, most importantly, we must know that as far as transfer pricing itself is concerned, and for which, as you know, there is tremendous body of litigation, very clearly this verdict is a, to my mind, clear affirmation that transfer pricing officers who go amok will eventually have to be curtailed by courts of law in India. So from that standpoint alone, from a foreign investor standpoint, I would be extremely satisfied with today's verdict. Secondly, from the standpoint also of intra-group structuring and restructuring and or deals, as the case may be, very clearly it is our opinion that these are not transactions that ought to be brought within the tax net to the extent that clearly they are not exigible to tax. And it was our opinion that these are not transactions that are exigible to tax, and that has been upheld. So we're certainly grateful for that finding from the Bombay High Court.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.